Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:06. It's O'Connor and Company here on a Monday morning. Thanks so much for letting us be a part of your morning routine. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. It just occurred to me, Julie Gunlock, that Taylor Swift, she doesn't get quite enough attention.
Sure, yeah.
Well, he should be focusing on her more often. Coming up later in this program, we'll be delighted to speak to Trevor Matich. Coming up in just 30 minutes, talk about the Commanders' victory. Can't get a handle on this Commanders team. They hot one weekend, cold the other weekend. It's like my first wife.
Oh.
And then at 8:05, Virginia Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears. What? It's okay. She doesn't listen.
Good.
Neither does the current wife. I can say anything I want. Let's bring in Joe diGenova before I get into trouble. Joe, do you know a good divorce lawyer? I'm just curious.
Well, I was just about to say, what a fabulous introduction.
Sorry.
He's working through some stuff today.
I really am. Joe, so Hunter Biden's lawyers have now responded to the increased scrutiny now that their plea deal has fallen apart with David Weiss, who was in the tank for them. He wants the Justice Department to investigate Tony Bobulinski, the whistleblower. This is witness intimidation to the nth degree, Joe.
Well, I think what you have here is Abby Lowell, has been a very successful lawyer. I think in this particular instance, I call this the lashing out defense, where they attack everyone who has anything to do with the underlying facts in the case and accuse them of wrongdoing. I think it's a bad strategy because it's becoming repetitive and therefore people are ignoring it. I don't think anyone listens to Abby Lowell anymore or reads his letters. I do think that he did write the letter to the right U.S. attorney if he's looking for the kind of finish that he wants. He wrote this letter to the current U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, Matthew Graves, who has proven himself to be a quisling, a toady, the kind of person who you never, ever want to have in the U.S. attorney's slot. He is exquisitely political, and he really has really disgraced the office of the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia. So Abby Lowell picked the perfect United States Attorney to write to. And if Matthew Graves decides he's going to investigate Tony Bobulinski, he may find himself under this new energized House of Representatives, he may find himself the object of an impeachment proceeding.
Yeah. Joe, we did get another revelation from the Oversight Committee last week. James Comer put out a video that really showed how the shell game worked with the money. Weeks after Hunter Biden had that text message exchange with the Chinese oligarch saying, "My father's sitting right next to me, and I want
right here next to me."
That's
My
right.
father is sitting right here next to me.
Next thing you know, $5 million wired into one business venture that Hunter Biden is associated with. He draws $500,000 into another LLC. Then he cuts a check for, I believe it was $100,000 to James Biden, the brother, and his wife into their personal account. Then the wife draws out $40,000 from that account, writes a check directly to Joe Biden for that amount, and they call it loan repayment. Now, Joe, when you're following the money in a criminal enterprise, I hear you already chuckling. Why is it interesting and intriguing evidence that someone writes on a payment loan repayment? What's the relevance of that? Relevant.
Because that's a lie. It's a false statement, and it's designed to cover up the fact that the money was not for a loan repayment, but rather was merely proceeds of a money laundering operation which were being distributed, quote unquote, equitably among the various co-conspirators. Yeah. What you have here is manifest evidence from the Comer Committee of classic money laundering. And the fact that the Justice Department is doing nothing about it will be on the gravestone of Merrick Garland. This is the kind of thing that creates legacies, bad legacies. And the case against the president and his family is so bad and so clear now, thanks to Comer's dogged pursuit of the bank records, that there is no answer. The answer is a letter from Abby Lowell to Graves demanding an investigation into Bobolinsky.
Yeah, that's the answer.
This is pretty sick stuff,
Joe.
Oh,
isn't it also true that when you, if you say that personal income coming into your accounts is a loan repayment, that's not taxable income, right?
That's correct. Then you don't have to pay taxes on it. Unless the loan is forgiven, then you have an entirely different set of circumstances in which the forgiveness may become income or a gift of some kind. But nonetheless, it could become what the government calls a taxable event.
Yeah.
But what you have is these are shell games being played by the Biden family. These are all lies. And by the way, have you ever seen a business plan or any document that reflects the business activity that was the subject of any of these loans, payments, fees, income? No, the answer is no. And that's because this was a long-running bribery conspiracy scheme by Joe Biden and his family and his brother and his son and his daughters and others to defraud the United States government and the people of the United States.
Yeah, Joe, I want to get your thoughts on Donald Trump taking the stand in the New York civil fraud trial today. But really quickly, there was this tweet by Larry Sabato who said he was talking about the New York Times, this new New York Times Santa poll. And then he which is a disaster for Biden. And then he reassures everybody by saying, stay calm, carry on, because essentially he says Trump's going to be in jail. What do you make of that?
Well, it's sort of a sad, sort of a swan song for Larry Sabato, who used to be viewed as somewhat of a sort of a guru, a go-to person that people, when they wanted to get some good thoughts about the politics of the day and the theological politics of the day, now he's become sort of a Bill Kristol of college professors who talk about political science. And I mean, that was basically a rant, a quiet rant, and basically the expression of a hope, not a fact. It's just absolute silliness, and it's kind of embarrassing that it comes from Sabato, who used to be so respected. It's very, very sad. It's just, let me just say it plainly, it's a stupid comment.
Yep.
But you wanted to follow up on the
and sorry, I didn't know if we had time, but Trump is going to be testifying today. He's going to be taking the stand, what do you expect to have happen from?
I got to say something. As long as he's been waiting to do this, and I think he's been actually waiting and wanting to do this, no one can tell what is going to happen in this courtroom today. Because Letitia James will be, as usual, coming on the days that are important for her mugshot.
Yep.
And she will be sitting in the front row.
Glaring.
I do not believe that the former president will be able to contain himself. I expect him to lash out at her. I expect him to lash out at the judge. I expect him to be his usual self. One only can wonder what Judge Angeron will do when the president attacks Letitia James. Legitimately, may I say, it would require heavenly restraint not to accuse her of prosecutorial misconduct. I think the president's going to be voluble. He's going to be himself, and I only wish I could be there to watch it.
Joe, can you hold on, because I want to talk to you about the protests we saw here in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere.
Who, me? Hold on for more time? Oh, I think we can work that out.
Well, I don't want to take you for granted. I appreciate
Please
it.
Please
do. 7:15 WMAL traffic.
The Vince Colonnade Show.
Weekday afternoons, 3 to 6.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
And we continue with Joe diGenova, former U.S. Attorney of the District of Columbia. And we saw these protests yesterday on behalf of the Palestinian and Hamas cause here in Washington, D.C. And they culminated with some pretty extraordinary and violent activity outside the White House fence. Some of the protesters tried to scale the fence. There were acts of vandalism and spray painting and graffiti. One arrest, Joe diGenova, with all that melee going on. One person was arrested for destruction of property. It will probably be released on his own recognizance. it's kind of hard to look at this and not draw some comparisons with some other political protests we've seen in Washington over the last couple of years.
I don't think there's any doubt. And we go back now to our Rosetta Stone in all of these stories, and that would be Matthew Graves, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. Make no mistake about it. Matthew Graves controls these decisions, obviously in conjunction with Merrick Garland's Justice Department. But when I was the United States Attorney, I was in charge of what happened after these events. Nobody else. The Attorney General didn't talk to me. I didn't get calls from the Deputy Attorney General asking me to do this, that, and the other thing. We had laws on the books. We enforced them. People either obeyed their demonstration permits or they didn't. If they destroyed property, they were arrested and prosecuted. It's pretty obvious that there's an agreement between Matthew Graves, the United States Attorney, and the Metropolitan Police Department that has an acting chief of police. And we'll see how long the new chief of police now lasts when you have an idiot for a mayor who all of a sudden has decided that there's a crime problem in the District of Columbia. Well, do you think trying to climb the White House fence and defacing White House property, vandalism around the White House deserves criminal prosecution? Apparently, Matthew Graves, the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, does not think so. This is all happening with his consent. If he says, let him go, they don't get prosecuted. And the Metropolitan Police Department, believe me, I've done this, talks to the United States Attorney and says, what do you want us to do?
But, you know, Joe, there are so many parallels here, and even just the visual of these pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas rallies and the BLM rallies. It's almost like it's BLM and George Floyd, it was sort of fading, and they needed something new to sort of take its place. And so this has just replaced it. It's more of that violence that everyone is going to sort of turn their back on, at least the people in D.C., and say, well, it's okay because it's pro-Palestinian.
This was not organic.
Right.
By the way, this was not organic. This was organized.
Yep.
These demonstrations all over the world and in the United States, and certainly in Washington, D.C., with all the pre-made signs and the flags, that stuff just doesn't happen. Everybody knows this. This is big money behind this. Somebody is fomenting this type of anti-civil behavior. And we now know, of course, that Matthew Graves and the Justice Department do not care. They don't want to know who's behind this. You know what I would have done if I were the United States Attorney? I hate to talk this way because it sounds like what I used to do. But you know what? I'm very proud of my time as United States Attorney, going after the corruption in the Barry administration, going after organized drug rings. We had a great law enforcement community, and I was proud to lead it at the time. But boy, this guy, Matthew Graves, is a disgrace. Where is he? Where is he? He shows up when it's time to investigate Tony Bobolinsky. I'll bet he's feverishly reading that letter from Abby Lowell, trying to figure out a way to do it without looking too stupid or too political. Those demonstrations in Washington were planned by somebody, financed by somebody, and I will bet you dimes to dollar the money did not come from the United States.
So, Joe, along those lines, I'd love for you to sort of give because you give great legal analysis, of course, and you obviously can relate to the job of the D.C. U.S. Attorney and recognize that Mr. Graves is completely falling down on his duties and, in fact, undermining law enforcement and law and order in Washington, D.C. Give me your political take, though, on this fascinating and disturbing realignment within the Democratic Party where, Harry Truman was the first world leader to recognize Israel's right to exist. And we now have a president and an administration who is undermining the state of Israel at every and some leading members of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives who are actually mimicking anti-Semitic chants from the river to the sea is clearly a call to genocide, to wipe Israel off the face of the map, and that's become an inspiring message from some leading members of the House of Representatives. Things changed very rapidly in this country, and certainly within the Democratic Party.
The Democratic Party has taken Jews for granted, just the way it has taken blacks for granted. They are an interest group. They are an identity group. They are someone to be used. They are someone to trot out at elections. But deep, not only, but just below the surface in the Democratic Party has been a stream of anti-Semitism that you can sense, that you can feel. It's just unbelievable. And the notion that somehow this is all just happening right now is ludicrous. And I blame the Jewish community for blindly voting Democratic over the years when it was against their interests. And all of this stuff about poo-pooing Donald Trump, that he was just sort of a crude political figure who just happened to do the momentous thing of moving the United States embassy to Jerusalem, which was the official position of the United States for 30 years, but no president would do it until he did it. And remember what happened? We were told there was going to be war in the Middle East. Well, it didn't happen. The embassy of the United States got moved to Jerusalem, and nothing happened. And the reason was very simple. There was a president that people feared. Nobody fears Joe Biden. He is a joke. And what's really tragic is that if a president were really a president, he would take on this anti-Semitism being manifested by the progressives and the left. This is pure communism, Marxist, Leninist, anti-Semitic hate to be used for political purposes. When I saw those demonstrations in Washington, I said, thank God I'm in St. Augustine, Florida. Yeah. Look at those loons. And did you hear any condemnation from the podium at the White House? I mean, I think that the two spokespeople for the President of the United States, Jean-Pierre and the pathetic Admiral, they cannot muster any indignity against anti-Semitism. It is amazing. They don't have the moral fiber to say the words that are necessary at this moment. The reason Biden is tanking in the polls, at least for the moment, is because people are sensing a moral vacuity. This guy is he's insane. He truly is King Lear. He's a moron, and he's a moron with atomic bombs. That is a dangerous combination.
I thought you might have a political observation on these marches. Joe diGenova, always great to talk with you, sir. Thanks for bringing it.
Thank you.
Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
7:36 now. Thanks for tuning in here to O'Connor and Company on Monday, the 6th day of November, day before Election Day. And to that end, in just 30 minutes, at the top of the hour, 8 o'clock, we're going to speak with Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears of Virginia. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Let's get right to it. Because the Commanders had a huge win in New England yesterday against the Patriots, although it's not your father's Patriots, but still a tough team, especially at home. We bring in Trevor Matich here to give us full analysis. Listen, Sam Howell once again with over 300 passing yards, a touchdown, and because he's been somewhat turnover prone, it was nice to see him shake off some of the speed bumps and hang on for the victory, right? I mean, there's some real positive signs there, Trevor, I hope.
A lot of positive signs. I mean, the biggest one is Howell, like you mentioned, Larry, that he's more decisive. He's getting the ball out more quickly. That helps to limit turnovers. Also, the offensive line a couple weeks ago made a couple of changes. They switched centers because of performance, left guard because of injury, and the offensive line has been a lot less abysmal over the last couple of weeks. So that's good, right? So it all adds up to Howell has more time, and he's able to engage those terrific receivers with more effectiveness.
Less abysmal is nice to hear. And also, this was the first time we saw the new look Commanders defense after the two blockbuster trades right before the deadline, with Chase Young going away and Montez Sweat going away. But they looked pretty good. Now, it was against Mac Jones, but still, they looked pretty good there, I thought, the defensive line, especially K.J. Henry.
Yes, they did. K.J. Henry actually got called for a roughing the passer penalty. He's a rookie draft choice. Yeah, the official's explanation was it was a sack. It was a good sack. Everything was clean. The official's explanation was that the hit was clean, but that he came down and landed on Mac Jones, the Patriot quarterback, and putting his weight on him coming down would have been a penalty. But when you look at the replay, that didn't happen. So they took away a sack from a kid, and that was too bad. But you're right. I mean, the defense did well without those two edge rushers. And that's important because it turned out those two trades, Chase Young and Montez Sweat, traded away 2 first-round draft choices that are pass rushers at the trade deadline here last week. Those are actually good for the future of the team. But the present of the team is still there. I mean, this team right now, with 8 games to go, is only 1 game out of the third wild card spot. I mean, they are close to the wild card right now, and one of the teams ahead of them, Seattle, they go to play next week. So, this is not a matter of quitting on the season because they traded those 2 guys. They traded them because the near future and long future of the team is better because of the compensation.
Yeah, but the schedule is brutal going forward. You mentioned the Seahawks at home, which is always tough, even though they looked pathetic against the Ravens yesterday. They also have to play the Cowboys twice. They have to play the 49ers. They have to play the Dolphins. They have to play the Rams. I mean, don't feed me false hope here, Trevor Matich.
False hope is the only hope we have with this team. For the last 2 decades, it's only been false hope. You hang on to what you have to. Yeah, as we look back on this season, I mean, they've lost 5 of their last 6, right? But 2 of those losses were to Chicago and the Giants, who have only won 2 games on the season, each of those teams. So we'll look back at that. But the thing is, Washington is getting better. And in this game of Seattle, you're right, it's a home game for Seattle, so it's a long ways for Washington to have to travel. But they're regressing, and their quarterback has been a turnover machine. So it's not out of the question. Washington, I mean, this game against Seattle coming up is going to be a real tell for whether this team can make the playoffs.
So, Trevor, like I said, Sam Howell now back-to-back weeks where he's gotten over 300 passing yards. Do you believe that Sam Howell has made enough progress this year for him to sort of be the guy going forward, or do you think that's still up in the air, especially considering this may be Ron Rivera's last go-around as the head coach?
Yeah, he's auditioning for possibly the next staff as well. I think he's made enough progress to show that the team does not have to expend a ton of resources in a fire sale to find a replacement for him. In other words, they don't have to break the bank on a free agent quarterback. They don't have to trade up into the top 10 of the draft to get a guy because they have to. I think Sam Howell has shown enough, and he's shown that he has repaired mistakes. He's not making the same mistakes over and over and over, which means he's only getting better. That means the team has the luxury of not having to go out and spend too much for a replacement.
All right, so moving forward, the Seahawks in Seattle next week, as you mentioned, and it does have some playoff implications, even though it's mid-November. They have a chance.
They have a chance. And again, this chance is based on the idea that the line is getting better because, remember, one of the strengths of this team is the wide receiving core. It's deep, it's versatile, it's very, very good. And if the line gives the quarterback enough time to hit those guys, they can make plays all up and down the field. And so right now the hope is that they can continue to get better to match the level of their schedule coming up. Because you're right, it is a tough path. It is a tough schedule. But this game at Seattle, we've got to hope that Seattle doesn't bounce back because they've been playing some pretty poor football.
It's a fun team to watch, though, and that's all we can ask for at this point. And yes, false hope is better than no hope at all.
That's right. I don't choose to believe in them yet, but I do choose to be entertained by them.
Are you not entertained? Thank you, Trevor Matt. It's always good to talk with you.
Take care.
Julie, a lot of people have been streaming The Chosen and binging it. And, the first season got released on Netflix about 6 months ago. That opened it up to a whole new audience. Mm-hmm. You can watch it, that first season there. You can watch multiple seasons on Amazon Prime, or you can just go to the Angel Studios website and you can stream all of the episodes there. Anyway, I've watched it a couple of times. Have you? I know that you started watching the first season.
Yeah, and we got through that when we started the second. We've taken a pause, but it's incredible. Yeah,
you want to jump on that. And the fourth season is coming up. It's become a real sort of grassroots viral hit, and it's really, really well done. It's the story of Jesus gathering the apostles. It's basically the gospel story, the final, I'd say, the 3-year ministry of Jesus. It begins with the wedding feast. It begins with him choosing Peter and Andrew, moving on to the wedding feast in Cana in the first season, and then continues on. as you can imagine, it's very emotional for the and by the way, if you don't have an understanding of the New Testament or the Gospel, it's really, again, it's not biblically perfect. Of course,
Sure.
It's a dramatic series, but it's really well done and pretty close actually to Scripture. All right, setting all that aside, a lot of us are excited about the 4th season coming out in February. In fact, we're so excited we can't wait to see it. And the Angel Studios people have accommodated that desire because they're actually putting out a Christmas special.
Nice.
I guess the whole season or the whole series was first demoed with like a pilot episode that focused on the shepherds coming to the manger scene in Bethlehem. I haven't seen this, but I guess it was sort of the precursor to The Chosen. They've now remastered that and represented it, edited through with one of the episodes from one of the early seasons. And they've put together this special Christmas presentation. It's called Christmas with the Chosen Holy Night. It's going to be available in theaters, and it's also going to be streaming. So that's kind
Wonderful. You know, it is really hard to find enjoyable television out there these days. I struggle so much to find shows that I enjoy. So if you're like me and you're struggling, start The Chosen. It's wonderful, and it's great for the whole family. It's something my husband and I really enjoy watching together.
It really is. And don't, I get so annoyed with the quibbling with certain, in Scripture this happened a little differently. It's like, this is not meant to be some sort of documentary presentation of word-for-word Scripture truth. And there's a lot, they create backstories that make sense for the apostles that we don't know a whole lot about.
Right.
Beyond Scripture. So they sort of flesh out their lives that are in keeping with historic realities of the Holy Land at that time, 2,000 years ago. And it really does make you feel...
we don't actually have videos of what things were like back then.
Exactly.
So they're doing
I
their
doubt
best.
that really happened. Of course it didn't happen.
But they
it is
also
a fictional drama.
And look, I'm not a big fan of this, but they humanize them in a way that's still very respectful to the Scripture. Like some of the back and forth can be quite funny. And there are these sort of lighter moments, and so that in that you sort of feel like you know them a bit better. It makes them more human.
There's also a thing where they've sort of done this theatrical device at the end of certain episodes where something major has happened to advance the story of the gospel. They end with Jesus, played by Jonathan Romy, who was just
so great.
Transcendent performance, right? He and the apostles, they all sort of turn and start walking toward the camera with dramatic music, and they're walking in slow motion.
Yeah.
And Meredith, whatever we watch it, Meredith goes, slow motion Jesus! Slow motion Jesus! Oh my gosh! We love slow motion Jesus!
But it gives you kind of chills.
It does.
Right?
Yes. It's like, all right. So just tune in for the slow motion Jesus, and you'll be very satisfied. 7:53.